So, I'm Horgan. I'm a science writer, and I've been here at Stevens for 7 years. And I became really interested in complexity, I guess, in the early 90s, and ended up writing an article for Scientific American about it. I was especially focused on this place called the Santa Fe Institute, which is still a place where a lot of complexity research is done, but they've scaled their ambitions back somewhat. But I just want to tell you what their ambitions were, because I'm fascinated by what they were trying to do, even though they, I think, failed in spectacular fashion. Their hope was that there are all these different problems that science is trying to solve involving really complex phenomena in nature. Ranging from the immune system, the human brain, maybe the most complex object in all of nature, societies, economics. We heard today about the national security apparatus as a giant complex system. So you've got all these really different things, and the hope of the people who are in this field called complexity was that there are certain common features of these seemingly really different kinds of things. And of course, we've already discovered that there are common features. For example, everything is made out of atoms. So that's a kind of unifying principle underlying a lot of very different kinds of things. All biological systems have been shaped by evolution. That's another unifying insight. But these people, and they're brilliant people, very cross-disciplinary, were hoping that there was some big insight that science was going to discover that would rival any of these other great unifying insights that science has already achieved. One of the really intriguing ideas was that it might be like a counterforce to the second law of thermodynamics, to the tendency toward disorder of all systems. That came from a guy named Stu Kaufman, but there are other people. Ilya Prigogine was saying something kind of similar, and the hope was that you could maybe see some of these patterns, principles at work in one system, and that would help you to understand all these other different things. So it was this really grand, amazing vision, and I wrote an article about it, and I had my own skepticism, but then I also interviewed a lot of other people, including people in the Santa Fe Institute itself, who were very skeptical as well. I forgot to time my talk. 5 minutes, probably already over. I'm going to summarize some of the points I put in this to try to figure out what I wanted to say. I wrote a piece for Scientific American. I have a blog, and I'm just going to riff on a couple of the main points that I made. And I think you can divide the points I want to make into bad news and good news. I'll start with the bad news, and these are some of the points that I made back in the 90s. Some of these things I also wrote about in my book, Science, and I put some of them in my blog post. So the first thing is, complexity. What is it? You've already heard solutions to this problem. There was a physicist, I think still at MIT, Seth Lloyd, who tried to compile a list, and the list is virtually infinite. And I realized at some point, hearing people talk about complexity, that you can substitute the word interesting for complexity, and it works. It basically did the job. And so then what I said in the Scientific American piece is, can you have a field of research studying something when you don't really know what it is? Now, I don't think the answer to that is necessarily no, but it's something you need to grapple with. I think it's important to look at the history of this field. There have been some of the grandest theories, paradigms, whatever you want to call it, in the history of 20th century science are really, if you look back, you can see as unified theories of complex things. Cybernetics was an attempt by Norbert Wiener to come up. His idea was that machines, so that the way that engineers analyze what machines do, that those techniques could be applied to biology. You could think of cells and organisms as very complicated machines with signal processing and command and control going on and those sorts of things. And it became extremely popular and then not so popular. And this kind of boom-bust cycle you can see throughout the 20th century. After cybernetics, you had a similar boom-bust with catastrophe theory. Information theory, also some people, Claude Shannon himself was always saying, really, you shouldn't over-apply it. People in the humanities started getting excited about information theory, and Shannon wasn't very keen on that. So, but information theory was a grand unified theory of complex things. The immediate predecessor of complexity was chaos theory. And really, there's extremely little difference between chaos theory and complexity. I think complexity was just sort of, in some sense, repackaged chaos theory. It had a lot of the same goals, used some of the same techniques, and the general idea was that computers now are giving us the power. Computers plus fancy new mathematics associated with chaos are going to give us the power to really solve or make headway against some of these really intractable problems. So you got to keep that history in mind. All right. So, the original premise of complexity, as I said, was that you've got all these different complex systems, and there might be some common patterns underlying them. I think you have to have a special category for social systems, obviously, because humans are, I would say, irreducible in a conventional scientific sense. And I think it's, the way I like to put it is that particle physics is like tic-tac-toe compared to what anybody who's dealing with humans is trying to do, trying to understand humans at the individual level, let alone at the social level. So physicists, if you understand one proton, you understand all protons. They're all identical. Every human is unlike any other human in ways that are actually essential to our sense of what being human is. You can't sort of wish that away to make your model work better. The sort of recognition of individual rights is built into law and so forth, and it's something that the people in humanities keep reminding people of the sciences of all the time. One more point I wanted to make that I think is relevant, especially for this new center, that I'm worried about. I do think that engineers have something to bring to this issue of complexity, dealing with it in ways that scientists maybe wouldn't be very good at, in trying to create new technologies, new practices, to innovate your way to be able to manage complex systems more effectively. And in my piece, I wrote about how, it's a great idea in principle. In practice, you've got, there was, I thought, a brilliant presentation today about technology in medicine as being a huge driver of healthcare costs. Really, really significant point. I think if you look at finance too, you can see the introduction of increasingly sophisticated computer models as creating volatility in the market, which can actually have destructive consequences, as we've seen. I want to end on a positive note, though. I said I was going to have bad news and good news. My good news is that one way or another, we actually are managing ourselves. So we're the most complex thing in the universe, as far as we know. And we're doing a pretty good job. So we're dwelling on the problems. And Bill, I thought it was wonderful the way, at the end of your talk, you suddenly went global and talked about peace and sustainability. I just wanted to point out that over the last century, lifespans have doubled. All right? The number of people who live in extreme hand-to-mouth poverty has gone down. This comes from Jeffrey Sachs at Columbia. I think from about 2/3 of the population to about 1/6 of the population. So basically the number of people in really life-threatening poverty has been cut in half. And it's unprecedented. There are fewer people living in extreme poverty right now than any other time in history. There are more people living in democracies than ever. About 2/3 of humanity, again, lives under a democratic regime now. 100 years ago, it was about 10% of humanity. That's incredible. It's something to celebrate. You mentioned peace. This is something I've been writing and thinking about a lot recently. We now, believe it or not, are in one of the most peaceful periods, at least in modern human history. War casualties over the last 10 years, from our perspective as Americans, they look terrible. But globally, they are an order of magnitude lower than they were in the second half of the 20th century, and 2 orders of magnitude lower than they were in the first half of the century, the 20th century. So I don't know if it's what we're doing right, but we're doing something right. We are managing some extremely complex problems and moving in the right direction. Thank you.